Hello there, sword friends. Some of you have asked me about the shinken or katana that I use for practice very commonly, and some of you also know that I use a Hanwei Bamboo Mat that's been customized. In a video I made some time ago, I showed it to you, but I sucked at video then, so here's a little bit better pictures and video and such. First off, you can note the differences between the two swords. The Ito, or the CAS, is a lot different between the two. The shape is different, the size of the diamonds is different. The previous sword used a black silk, and it was a little bit loose. The new sword has a full wrap of samigawa. It's been lacquered black. The diamonds are a little bit of a different size, and it also uses Lohman's Tsunami Ito, which is a different type of Ito than the black silk. It looks like suede, but it's a synthetic material that's easy to clean, and well, frankly, I think it just gets tighter over time. It's a very, very good material for Ito. The habaki, believe it or not, is actually the same habaki. It's just been basically polished and had a little bit of decoration put on it. The seppa are obviously different. Those are new custom seppa, and the tsuba is different. You can see the old standard bamboo mat tsuba versus kind of the custom-made tsuba that is done in my swirly Mitsudome theme. You can also see there's a marginally different profile in terms of just the overall size. It's a lot smaller and thinner and a little bit, I don't know, just more refined in terms of its shape. Another lesson I can share with you is that the black Tsunami Ito doesn't really stain terribly when you bleed all over it. I cut myself some time ago and then thought it'd be a good idea to do some cutting practice, and the wound opened up and I bled all over my sword. A couple lessons to take away here. One, the black Tsunami Ito doesn't stain terribly easy. And two, while I've criticized gloss black sayas for showing fingerprints and all sorts of other stuff very easily, they do wipe off blood much easier than an Ishime saya. It's literally a lesson learned in blood. In terms of cutting performance, I've shared this video before, but in a nutshell, this was my first go at doing cutting in my Toyama Ryu class. Admittedly, I'm not that great, but you can see that the sword cuts pretty well, and this is after me using it a lot for doing other bottle cutting and other random hard target cutting, and cutting rolled up newspapers with wooden cores in them, and the blade frankly is still quite sharp and very serviceable in terms of a practical blade. It hasn't been sharpened or adjusted. The blade is still original and in very good shape. Anyway, I can tell you a little bit more about the sword itself. So these fittings are from Hyper Cafe. All over the saya and ska, they're fittings from Hyper Cafe. This is the kojiri, and it's like a handachi style. That's the general style of the kojiri anyway. Before I ramble too much, maybe it's important to note what Hyper Cafe is. There's two places you can access Hyper Cafe, and one is through their eBay link. Now, this would be the way I would suggest going first, because they tend to respond pretty well, and the prices, for whatever reason, on the eBay site tend to be a little bit less expensive than on their home website. However, the selection is pretty limited. Nevertheless, there's usually pretty good photos, and in the listing they have the measurements and all the important bits. The thing I'll note is that most of the time these Hyper Cafe fittings are kind of small for most production katana and most custom katanas that I deal with. Most of the time you want a fuchi size that's at least 40 millimeters, sometimes a little bit bigger, and a lot of times Hyper Cafe makes stuff that's around 36 to 39 millimeters, so it's usually on the smaller side. The one that's on my sword is 38, and there was some bitching and moaning that happened to get it fit on, and it does look a little small. I like it, but it's not really as big as it should be. On the home website, as you can see here, this is just a Hyper Cafe's home website. I'll put the link in the description below. There's a lot of different products and things like that. I haven't ordered anything other than fittings from this website. I did order the fittings for my sword or a few other swords off this one. I don't remember if I got them off of eBay or off of the website, but I know I have ordered things directly off of the website, but there's usually a premium to doing so. Some of the Fuchi Kashura kind of start at like $35 on eBay, but are $60 on the website. I don't exactly know why, but I do know if you ask Hyper Cafe too many questions, they tend to stop talking to you and kick you off the ability to bid on eBay. So I might recommend not asking them any questions. I don't know if I can even buy from them on eBay anymore, because last time I tried to bid on something, it said I'm prevented from bidding, and that's, I think, because I contacted them with too many questions. They just got sick of dealing with me and gave me the boot. And anyway, they're still overall pretty good. You can see that there's lots of swirly Mitsudome fittings on here. There's a lot of other types of fittings with different modes. What I will say is most of them seem to be made from this kind of brass substance with kind of a blackened top that wears away without too much difficulty. So it's going to be this goldish color underneath it. If you wanted something made out of steel or something more robust or something with a patina that will hold up over time better, these might not be the best ones. But for overall production cast fittings, they're at a reasonable price. They look pretty good and the cast quality isn't bad. They're just a little small and they're made out of that kind of goldish brass thing. I've still found a lot of different themes and fittings and styles here, and you can also see that if you sort by price, they'll often have stuff where you can get a Fujikashi or a Kojiri or sometimes a Daisho set, a lot of different products and things like that that might help you out. That's how I actually got mine, was in this big set of things, and I think it was like $100 and something, and it had the Fujikashi, Kojiri, Koiguchi, Kurikata. The Minuki weren't in there. I had to buy those separate. Anyway, that's Hypercafe's website. Back to talking about my sword. The mount or the lacquer on the saya is black, and you can see there's these swirly mitsudomes put into it in this kind of gold, pearl, translucent-y type stuff that speckles in the sunlight. In some lights it kind of disappears, and other lights it really pops, and you can see these kind of nice little sparkles, because, you know, I like my shit bedazzled and whatnot. But they pop out, they're in a random placement, and they don't draw a whole lot of attention or look terribly blingy unless you have them kind of just in the right light, and then they pop out and have, you know, a little PJ sparkle party going on the saya, which, you know, I'm a subtle kind of bling guy. Not necessarily when it comes to mitsudomes. Actually, there's 20 swirly mitsudomes on this sword. I think it is the most swirliest mitsudomiest sword that I've ever done. And if I count all of them, all over the fittings and the Kojiri and the Tsuba, there's 20 of them in total, which isn't terribly lucky. I think the Japanese prefer uneven numbers. Anyway, in terms of the sai, you can see here the Koiguchi and the Fuchi and how they line up. There's a little bit of a transition there, but it's not overly pronounced. It's very small and thin, and overall it looks nice, but it makes the saya a bit small for this blade, and I personally prefer that. It looks really good, but the custom mounting here, you can see how they come together. They're like a brass style fitting overall, and it kind of wears away somewhat easily, and they don't hold up terribly well. But anyway, the Koiguchi is also got a metal ring around it, which isn't terribly standard. You see this on a lot of production katana, and you can see where I've scraped the tip along the Koiguchi here, and it's not good for the sword, it is not good for the steel here, but that's the construction of it. It also had to be adjusted a little bit so this fat sword could fit in it. The Tsuba is a custom Tsuba by Akaru, I forget the name, but he's, I think, a guy in Poland that makes Tsubas. Just to add to the conversation, I should probably note where I got the Tsuba exactly. So I think this is the eBay link for the gentleman's website where he posts some stuff on eBay, and I'm pretty sure that's how I actually got the Tsuba. But he has a homepage which has got some audio to it. You can see me kind of violently shaking my mouse in frustration. Actually, why don't I share a little bit of this audio with you? It's kind of derpy, and every time you click on a page, it shows back up. But I think this is the guy's homepage. I've never bought anything directly off of this page, but there's a ton of Tsuba on here, and I really have to commend him on his ability to make them. There's all sorts of photos, and you could probably find something to match the theme you're looking for if it's not swirly mitsudomes and you're not as nutty about them as I am. But there's a lot of different themes, and I think he makes different Fujikashi or Tsuba and does different sword work, so you might try pinging the guy. I know Aaron Justice used to use a lot of this stuff from him, I think, but I've seen his works on different blades over the last several years, and people seem to be pretty happy with them, though just admittedly I've never purchased anything directly off the website. I'm pretty sure I've always gotten stuff off of eBay that related to him, or a trade of some kind. Anyway, back to my sword. And I got this one from him a long time ago, and it's a swirly mitsudome, so you know how that is for me. It's pretty much the highlight of the mounts, though. The mitsudome is probably the nicest piece. The Hypercafe fittings, the Minuki here, they're not bad, but they're simple kind of production cast fitting type things. The Ito is tight, and this video is taken pretty recently, and I can tell you that the Ito just seems tighter than when I got it. It doesn't move over the Minuki. It's like it's lacquered on, and it's getting more rigid over time rather than less. I suppose for the purposes of sharing, I should say where I got the Ito. This is Fred Lohman's website. Now, I've never ordered directly from this website, though many, it seems, have. I usually send my sword off to get mounted, and whoever mounts it ends up doing the ordering for what they need. But there's a myriad of different products here for sword restoration, sword packages, things like that. Again, I can't really give my vote of confidence because I've never personally dealt with, but I can say that the products are usually pretty good. I've had a lot of Tsuba and Ito and all sorts of other products from the site. I just haven't ever dealt with them directly. Anyway, this sword uses the Tsunami wrap, and there's a bunch of different types of silks and leathers and things like that on the website, but I've used the Tsunami wrap on a lot of different sword projects over the years. I think the only one I haven't used is the red color, but I've used the gray and the black and the blue actually comes out really nice. The browns are great. It's a great material for Ito, and I'm really happy with the turnout. It's wonderful and it holds up great. Alrighty, back again to my sword. The Kashira is also a Handachi style. I like the overall shape. You can see it's wearing away really easily here, but in a nutshell, there's also a custom kind of brass ring that's gone through so the knot can be tied and it can be secured on that way. It looks really cool. I'm really happy with it. The Habaki, here's another shot. You can see some more of the details in it. As for the blade, it's been used a lot. I've cut a lot of rolled up wet newspaper with wooden cores. I've cut tatami mats with it. I've cut water bottles with it. This thing has been my go-to blade for a number of years now, and it's held up extremely well. I have absolutely no complaints. It doesn't rust really easily. I haven't had any nicks or dings in the edge. There's no bends. The blade is just as I got it so many years ago, and it's in about the same shape. The only thing I can say about the one I have in comparison to maybe some of the others is that the hamon is a little bit duller. That might be because I've cleaned it and polished it with mother's mag and that kind of thing, but otherwise it's held up extremely well and continues to hold up really well. It's a little bit tip heavy for some folks. I'll say that it's not going to be the favorite of everyone, but it's certainly my favorite and one of the very few katanas I have that is not for sale. This video wasn't just to show off the bamboo mat that I have. Hopefully you found some value in seeing where some of the fittings came from. Maybe you didn't know about Hyper Cafe or Akira, I'm probably saying his name wrong. You might not have known about the Tsunami Ito from Fred Lohman, or maybe some of the results that I've had in some of the other videos have been positive and helped you figure out what you want to put on your sword. But there's another lesson that I would say here. So if I digress a little bit, I liked this bamboo mat katana. It doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense either because it's not necessarily the same size of blade that I usually gravitate towards. It's a production sword, and you've probably seen on my channel that I have a few other swords to choose from, so why this one? Well, I just really liked the way that it felt in my hand. So much so that I bought several other bamboo mat katanas thinking that I would do something stupid to this one eventually, break it, chip it, in such a way that it wouldn't really be economical to repair considering the cost of a new one and the cost of polishing and fixing and whatnot. So I thought, oh, I'll buy some other ones, and none of them felt the same way. And I was really concerned when I had this one that if I have it remounted or change it, that it'll change the balance and that I won't like it the same way, and all of the features and things that I really like about this one will be different if I change the Fuchi Kashira and all of the whole spiel here. Now the Habaki was the same. I kept all the original fittings for a while, thinking that, well, if I wanted to switch back I could, but that really wasn't necessary. I ended up selling off all the extra bits because everything about this sword that I liked was just enhanced. Every detail about how it handled and how it drew and all of that was just enhanced and made better, and it didn't really change the balance in such a way that it felt like a different sword. It just felt like a better version of the same sword. So that's an option that's available to you, and people ask me very frequently, what's the best sword to get with XYZ budget? Well, if you're a practitioner of martial arts and you plan on doing Iaido, or you plan on doing kata with it, you plan on drawing it or learning some sort of Japanese sword art, having a sword that's mounted properly is a very big benefit in terms of you get the feel of how it's supposed to be used. Now, I say that because the Chinese forges have come a long way in making a good sword. You've seen in some of the videos that I've made that I've bashed some of these swords against walls and bricks and stuff like that, and they've held up really well. You can get a really good sword for $200 that takes a lot of punishment. Unfortunately, the mounting has not come as far as the forge work has. So in terms of how they feel, how they draw, how they feel in your hand, how they hold up, how tight the Ito is, how tight the Kashira is on there, all of that kind of stuff isn't necessarily done it hasn't improved in the same way as just the forged steel itself has. So if you ask me, if you had a budget of say $1,000, I would rather have a $100 or $200 sword and spend the rest of that money customizing it, getting a new ska and a new saya and something that it draws and functions properly as a practitioner. Now this might not be as important if you plan on hanging it on a wall, if you plan on only cutting water bottles with it, and you're not doing a lot of drawing or kata, you're not resheathing the blade a lot, all of that kind of stuff isn't necessarily as important. I'd still say that it's going to be a benefit to you, but you might not notice it as much. Nevertheless, if you are a practitioner and you're thinking about where to spend your money, buying a production sword and having it redone is definitely a solid option as a practitioner. It's one of the best decisions that I've made. I've been extremely happy with this sword, and as I mentioned before, it's just one of one of very, very few swords that isn't for sale. This one will probably go in the ground with me. Anyway, I hope that is a worthwhile perspective to consider. I hope that you found the video interesting, and cheers. Thanks for watching.